Some of you maybe have been following the case of Artur Pawlowski, the Polish pastor up in Canada, who was famously recorded telling the Nazi Gestapo Canadian health police to get out of his church. That was right here.
Please get out. Get out of this property. Immediately get out. Get out of this property immediately. Out. I don't want to hear anything. Out of this property immediately. I don't want to hear a word. Out. Out. Out of this property immediately until you.
This was Arthur Pawlowski appropriately dealing with an unlawful government intrusion. They did not have a warrant. They did not have a right to be in the church. Their entire purpose was to intimidate the pastor, intimidate the churchgoers. And this, of course, was related to Canada's draconian lockdown orders that were going on at the time. Now, this was back in April of 2021. So this is a while back. And this has been an ongoing issue with Arthur that has been escalating with every single encounter with law enforcement. He says that he has religious freedom, the right to preach, the right to proselytize, the right to exercise his faith, something that we thought maybe existed in most countries in at least the West, in Western European style countries. The freedom of religion is something that has been growing since America set the standard back in 1791 with the ratification of the Bill of Rights. But it doesn't seem to be holding in places like Canada. In many of the European countries, we see the erosion of freedom of religion. And heck, even in the United States, we see it as well. Sure, we may get the errant decision here and there from the Supreme Court upholding the right to preach, the right to have people in your churches, the right to practice your religion. But we do see erosions of it here as well, and the COVID lockdowns have been one of the biggest parts of the erosion of all of our rights. This is not limited in any way to religion, but just try and counter the narrative on COVID and see how well your rights of free speech hold up. And I am not just talking about places like YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook engaging in censorship. I'm talking about how your rights are being undermined from the words of the most important American religious pulpit, those of the bully pulpit of the President of the United States. And Joe Biden has been using it extremely effectively to bludgeon its citizenry and to create an underclass of people, a class of people who think maybe vaccine mandates aren't the right way to go. Doesn't matter what you think anymore because Joe Biden, using the power of the president, has relegated you to a second class. You may have the illusion of free speech rights, but you don't have the illusion to exercise that free speech or free expression when you go into a restaurant in, say, New York or San Francisco or, heck, many of the states around the country. You don't have those rights anymore because government has taken them away from you, and they're doing it with the full-throated endorsement of the president. And even if government isn't taking it away from you, the president is empowering private actors to take away those rights. He's emboldening them. He's giving them the excuses through press releases that are masquerading as executive orders that have never been written about mandates, that still have not been tested for their constitutional scrutiny. We don't even know, according to the Supreme Court, if the president has the power to issue a mandate mandating a vaccine on COVID-19 in the current pandemic. And this is an important part of actually breaking down what Supreme Court rulings mean. You'll see everybody say, oh, the Supreme Court has upheld mandates in the past. But that's the past. That's a different set of circumstances. It's a different disease. It's a different time. We have different levels of medicine. We have different ideas about what rights are even. The way you break down a case like a COVID mandate coming from the president from a press release is the question of, does the president of the United States during a COVID pandemic that has been going on for 2 years have the power to issue a mandate from a press release for COVID-19 vaccinations for all federal employees and all federal contractors. Does he have the power to do that? Does he have the power to do it under the terms he set? We don't know. It hasn't been tested. And the main reason it hasn't been tested is because the president hasn't actually written down an order. When he does, it'll be challenged, and we'll find out. What does the Supreme Court say about the constitutionality of this? But that's a question for America. And this, though this is a general rant about freedom that should not disappear. I almost said does not disappear, but it did. It has. It's gone. It's gone. But should not disappear just because of some crisis. If freedom disappears in any crisis, you don't have freedom. You have an illusion of freedom. But this isn't about American freedom. This is about Arthur Pawlowski and what Arthur Pawlowski has just been sentenced to in Canada. And the results of this should actually appall and bother everyone. Anti-mask pastor ordered to preach science and pay a $23,000 fine. And if the fine is the part of this headline that bothers you, then you aren't paying attention to just how tenuous our rights are in the West. I don't want this. Go away. Pastor Artur Pawlowski, a pastor for Street Church Ministries in Alberta, Canada, has been known for organizing religious services that break COVID-19 restrictions. Again, that whole idea of the freedom of religion, COVID-19 restrictions are not there to trump the freedom of religion. The freedom of people to gather, to worship, is sacred. And I don't mean sacred as in religiously sacred. I mean sacred as in literally set apart from the law in the Constitution of the United States and in general understandings of Western freedom. But it's gone. It's gone. Again, this is Canada. Canada and much of Europe has been pretending to be free for a long time. In fact, it's always been funny to me when people say, oh yeah, your rights are you have the same free speech and free religion and all that stuff in Canada and the UK and everywhere. These are all civilized places, but you don't. You don't. And this shows it. This week, Court of Queen's Bench Justice Adam Germain ruled that in addition to probation and paying a $23,000 fine, that when preaching, Pawlowski must also note that most scientific opinions contradict what he claims. He has no freedom of conscience anymore. He has no freedom of religion. He has no freedom to preach the power of God, of healing, of faith, none of that. And you may disagree. You may disagree with Pawlowski's message. That's fine. I don't even know his overall religious beliefs. I just know that people have the freedom of conscience and faith, and that is their right. It's a right that comes not from a government, but from God and nature's God, to borrow the deistic phrase of the founders of America. It comes from nature and her God, not your God, not my God, not Allah, not anywhere else. It comes from the inherent birth of a person. That's where your rights are founded. They're founded in your very creation. Whether it be from a Judeo-Christian God, whether it be from a mud shaman, whether it be from the earth, Gaia herself, her own birthing hips, squirting you out onto the land. It doesn't matter where you came from. The fact that you're here is where your rights come from. That's where your faith, your right to faith, religion, the free exercise thereof, where that comes from. The right that your government cannot stop you from practicing comes from your existence. We've forgotten that. We think it comes from government. His brother and another man were also fined as well. But the most important parts of this are, so they have probation hours that cannot include their ministry. They each have their individual fines. But this is the scary parts. The outlet also reported that Germain, the judge, suggested they use phrases like, I am aware that the views I am expressing to you may not be held by medical experts. This is compelled speech. This is compulsory speech. This is to demand that they lie. A government is forcing a pastor to lie to his people. CBC reported that Germain said Scott and the Pawlowskis have contributed to this ominous health situation. This, in turn, Germain said, caused people to doubt the legitimacy of the pandemic. Well, I mean, we can't have that, can we? We can't have people making up their minds. We can't have people having faith in some other power than government to deal with an issue. We can't do that because then we lose our control. He said he believed the Pawlowski brothers reveled in their arrest. He has a fervent desire that I martyr him, Germain said when speaking of Artur. And then here we go. The position of the Alberta Health Services is that Pastor Pawlowski and David Pawlowski knew they faced contempt sanctions for their conduct in openly defying the AHS health orders, which were an effort to curb the spread of COVID-19. But here's the thing. The contempt was handled with the fines. If you're willing to pay your fine or do your jail time or your probation for your contempt, I guess that's the power of government. But that's not the scary part. Again, the scary part, the tyrannical part, the infringement on overall freedom, and the message to every other defiant pastor in Canada, what few they may have left after being beaten down for 2 years, after being defunded by removing the congregants from showing up. I don't know if you realize this, but oftentimes people's donations to church are not just a matter of their faith, but a matter of the opportunity to donate. If they're just there, well, okay, they'll throw some money in the collection plate. If they're not there, lots of people aren't mailing checks. And you can criticize people for their weakness, but that's how people work. In general, that has nothing to do with the church or faith. It's just a function of people. People are opportunistic creatures, and they'll take the opportunity to do something that they strongly believe in. But when that opportunity isn't right in front of them, they can strongly believe in it, and it can still fall by the wayside. So pastors across Canada, churches across Canada have been starved of attendance. They've been starved of donations. They've been starved of their membership. And their members have been starved of their faithful teachings. The only teachings on COVID-19, the only wisdom is coming from the great wise government of Canada. And that is a horrifying thought. So they can't lose this. And that's why the nefarious part of this decision is the compelled speech. It is the compelled speech. It is nothing else. It never could be anything else because a fine can be overcome. Jail time can be served. But compelling you to speak against your own conscience is the true evil, power of government. That they can coerce you to say something you do not believe to people who listen to you. And with that, we have the death of freedom. Godspeed, Canada. You'll need it.